Hello, everyone. Welcome to Jamaica 411. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm your host, Michelle Stern. If Mark Golding is challenged by Damian Crawford in 2027, the big question is where will the 28 PNP MPs stand? Now, mind you, the next PNP leadership will not be decided by the MPs, of course. That decision belongs to the 40,000 or so party membership. Now, you will have heard several persons giving their own analysis as to where they think the MPs will line up and behind whom, whether Mark Golding or Damian Crawford. But it was the analysis that I saw on Facebook by Lawrence Rowe that inspired me to do this video. He made some pretty good suggestions. I remember Lawrence was coming from the inside. He was a PNP member, and so he may have a good idea as to how each of the MPs may vote. And also, he was once in the Rise camp, and he was also part of the PNP structure. He's been there for years. So he gave his analysis. You would have heard Cliff Hughes with his analysis, and other NNN persons. You would have heard other people as well, risers and others, giving their own views. But today, I am going to be analyzing all 28 members of parliament and who they are most likely to support. And this, of course, is my opinion if Mark Golding is faced with a challenge from Damian Crawford next year. The support of the MPs is important. So to the councillors, because these are the persons mainly who are interacting with the delegates and the membership, but you have other party operatives too. The delegates, those persons who form the groups and those persons who are paying for the groups, they are critical to any victory. And so even if a candidate may have a majority of MPs in their corner, it does not guarantee victory. And we have history on our side to prove that. If it was the support of the members of parliament that Portia Simpson Miller was waiting on to be party leader, it would have never happened. Because as you would recall, in 2006, in the first runoff, Portia didn't have many MPs in her corner. I seem to remember four: Philip Paulwell, Danny Buck, Roger Clark, and I can't remember which other one. I don't remember who the councillors support, but I know the trade unionists supported Portia, if my memory serves me right. So, had it been left up to the MPs alone, she would not have become president of the People's National Party. Neither when she was in the runoff in 2006, and certainly not after she lost the election and there was a challenge to her leadership by Dr. Peter Phillips in 2008. Again, the MPs had lined up behind Dr. Peter Phillips. So the MPs' support, it maybe look impressive, but it does not guarantee victory. What guarantees victory, in my view, based upon what I've been observing, would be the operatives, those on the ground who support you, those in the groups, those persons who are counselors, those persons who control the groups. You know, they pay the dues and they were the ones that formed the groups and therefore have influence over the membership. Maybe they have control over them, but this now would be a one man, one vote. And I still think that the persons with the influence will be able to influence the membership nonetheless, because in all things, and it's of course very prominent in political parties, you have those who are leaders and those who are willing to be led, right? Only the independent minded ones will make the difference, and we don't know how many of such persons would exist in the party. But they exist, and so it's a toss up. Now, the MPs are very important because they are high profile. These are the people that the country knows, and they'll be out on the political platforms, each camp, and they will be selling their candidate and oftentimes opening their mouth and say a lot of rubbish that they ought not to be saying as well when the campaign gets heated. So that is where we'll be looking today, at these 28 PNP MPs and where it is their support may stand. Before I go on, let me remind everybody that all of us out here are speculating. Well, it is speculation that a contest may go on. And I think we may have good reason for believing that a contest may go on when we start to hear party slogans like holding with Golding and forward with Crawford, right? Once you start hearing those and you start to hear about people inside the party canvassing, right? And they have not denied that they have been canvassing because them name call. And, you'd have heard persons from the inside of the party who are party members, them talk to people and they know things and they come out and tell us that things tighten and that there's tension. And then you see the bloggers, them out there going at it and all them kind of something there. So it appears as though something is up. Now, I want to make it absolutely clear. A leadership election in the People's National Party is not officially underway. I need to make that clear. And there has been no formal declaration from Damian Crawford that he intends to challenge Mark Golding. However, political parties are always shaped by relationships, alliances, and competing visions for the future. And we know that that is one thing Mas Damian has, a vision of him leading the PNP and one day being Prime Minister of Jamaica. And so in this analysis, I'm examining the PNP's 28 members of parliament and assessing who each is most likely to support if a leadership contest were to take place between Mark Golding and Damian Crawford. Between those two, not between Mark Golding and Philip Powell, not between Mark Golding and Julian Robinson, but between Mark Golding and Crawford. So this is not about who would win the presidency. That decision rests with the party membership. Instead, this is an assessment of where the parliamentary support appears to lie based on political history, the statements that they have been making publicly, alliances that we observe and know of, especially when it comes to past contests, and observed relationships. As always, politics is dynamic, and I don't have to tell you that. People's positions can change overnight. New alliances can emerge, of course, especially when people are offered positions. I won't talk about money because at this level, money is not what is important. What is important at this level would be the positions that you can get by supporting one candidate or the other. And so today's assessment may not be tomorrow's reality. In other words, come next year, if the challenge were to go on and the offers start to make as to, what role each MP can play in which camp, that could change everything. But based on the evidence that is available today, let us examine where the PNP's parliamentary group appears to stand. We're going to be looking at Mark Golding as the incumbent. And we're going to be looking at what I call his core support. But before we can examine where each of the PNP's 28 members of parliament stand with regards to their support, we have to first understand something fundamental about political parties and political loyalty. Almost everybody who is listening to this video is going to be able to relate because almost everyone prefers either the PNP or the JLP, right? So you're going to be able to relate to what I'm about to read for you. I am asking the question, why is it so difficult for a person committed to a political party to switch to the rival party? Not only is it true of loyalties to the political party, but also to the shared philosophy and shared ideology of the group. Here now is something you're going to be learning about yourselves and others. Switching political parties is difficult because party affiliation is deeply tied to personal identity, social belonging, and psychological biases rather than just policy. So if we pause here and just analyze it, it is saying that once you decide that you born PNP and you're born Labour right, that first of all is your personal identity. And then you belong to a group of people who have similar goals and similar beliefs that the party that you support is the best party for Jamaica. That's what you first believe. And you believe that the policies that the government is coming with, your particular party is proposing, is best for the country. So already you have what is known as psychological bias. You have a sense of belonging to something important, and you have now established your personal identity. Once that is the case, it is hard for you to just take up yourself and switch to the other party. This is what makes it so difficult for you to even think about joining the other party, because that's not your social group. That is not where your personal identity lie. And your psychological biases is what will prevent you from doing so for the most part. This resistance to change is driven by severely interconnected factors. So they're going to explain now what is really happening to you. It speaks of the identity and social belonging. Political loyalty functions much like a sports fandom or religious affiliation. So you see all them people who say they love Brazil and love Argentina, you not get them switch. If them team not in the World Cup, they may cheer for another one, but for them team that. And no make me bother start on the religious affiliation, right? And they're saying that your political loyalty is similar to the loyalty that you may have to your church, right? It goes on to say, a voter's political party is integrated into their core sense of self, and changing sides can trigger a painful loss of community and social alienation from friends and family. How many of you have seen people who switch sides being alienated by them family and them friend? Don't talk to them. Comrade switch from being a comrade and turn Labour Party supporter. Hey, you were never a comrade in the first place, and them don't talk to them over politics. Labour Party supporter or member switch and turn PNP member. Hey, friend and family stop chat to them, right? All over the politics. It then speaks to partisan motivated reasoning. Now, let me establish that what we're looking for here are the behavior of the risers. We are particularly interested in the behavior of the risers because we already know how PNP and GLP stay, right? Yes, everything I'm going to read, it's going to relate to you and you're going to know, sir, so you stay and you're going to see it in other persons as well because you're committed party members. But we're really trying to discover whether it also applies to those risers. And you're going to have certain persons who you would have been reading about on Facebook and you're going to listen to them on YouTube and TikTok, and you will recall their reasoning. And what we want to establish is whether or not these also apply to them. Because if it does, then the very same way in which the PNP and the GLP members behave, you can expect the risers to behave in that way. Are you seeing where I'm going with this? Yes, it's the risers' behavior that we are trying to establish based upon what it is that we have observed for ourselves. Now it says psychologically, people instinctively seek out information that validates their current beliefs and dismiss information that challenges their party. This filtering mechanism causes individuals to view their own party's flaws as minor, while magnifying the faults of the opposition. That is true of PNP and GLP supporters, but is it also true of the RISE supporters and RISE members? You let me know. Negative partisanship. Modern polarization means that voters are often motivated by a strong dislike or fear of the rival party rather than sheer enthusiasm for their own. This lesser of two evils mentality creates a strong emotional barrier to ever supporting the other side. So now you understand that. Why it is that you would have never ever think to switch to the other party. And when persons from your party switch, you vex with them and malice them and don't chat to them. Yes. And this fear and strong dislike didn't just come from out of the blue. It was largely stemmed and cultivated by both parties when they were in power. That the rivals, just don't want to see them in power anymore or again. And there are persons who strongly dislike the opponent's party because of their own personal experience when they were in power. And we're talking about negative experiences. And so this is the emotional barrier that they're talking about. Why it is that you would never think of switching and supporting the other side because of this fear and strong dislike. Let us now look very quickly at this particular question. If I want to form a new movement and I wanted to create for my movement persons who are loyal and committed to the movement as they are to the political party, I'm asking now, what steps do I need to take in order to succeed? And that is precisely the research that Bunting and Golding would have done in order to form the movement that eventually became Rise United movement of loyal supporters with the same kind of loyalty that they had for the People's National Party. They wanted a loyalty for that movement as well. So this is what Bunting and Golding would have done, especially to the youths in the People's National Party. They targeted the youth organization and the patriots. It says to build a movement with the fierce loyalty of a political party, you must transition people from casual supporters into a dedicated community. Political science and sociology show this requires shifting their focus from a simple cause to a shared identity. So that is what they needed to do. Remember, part of why it is that you're so loyal to your particular political party is because of the personal identity. You can identify with them. Well, if you want to take people out of that political party and make a new party, you're going to have to work on them psychologically to shift them into a new shared identity. The first thing you need to do is to understand what loyalty is and what it relies on. It relies on you knowing who you are and what you stand for. Define your movement's origin story, core values, and ultimate vision. And the next thing, which is most important, is clearly identify a common adversary, rival idea, or status quo to fight against. So now you know what those risers were doing when they were attacking the leadership of the PNP in 2019. And beyond that, they were establishing a clear difference between the risers and the authentic PNP. That was what Bunting and Golding was doing, right? And this is how they created this different identity for these people who are calling themselves risers. They then say, no, you must create visible symbols, design flags, logos, slogans, or colors, which is what happened in a campaign that members can proudly display to signal their belonging. But they did more than that. They also created a song for the movement. Rituals and traditions will have to be set in order to get the people to have this sense of belonging. So repeated shared experiences bind individuals to this group, right? Organize consistent meetings, rallies, or digital town halls to build a routine. Create a formal process for joining, such as signing a pledge or completing a basic training course. I do believe the Risers had a pledge and they had an application form as well. It was Miss Little Bit of Blood that had that on her Facebook page where they were asking for volunteers. Then they talk about no, you must celebrate the movement's holidays. And this is the type of techniques that had to be used in order to change the persons who enter the PNP to serve the PNP into risers to serve the interests of Peter Bunting. Now that I've set the foundation so you can understand what Rise United is all about, it's now important for you to understand the structure of the movement. You have, first of all, the Rise boss, and that Rise boss was and continues to be Peter Bunting. Mark Golding is his deputy, and the only reason why Mark Golding is the leader of the PNP was because they needed somebody to take the place of Bunting after he lost his seat in central Manchester. I am going to begin my look and analysis at the core support that Mark Golding has. And this core support comes from the top leadership of the Rise United movement that happens to be MPs as well. And you see all five of them line up behind him. Peter Bunting, who is the boss, Angela Brownberg, who became the chairman of the PNP, and then the general secretary is Dayton Campbell, and the deputy general secretary is Nikisha Burchell. She's also the media person, and the vice president is Ian Hills, one of them. So you see, they all received the position, no doubt the position that they wanted, and they formed the core. If Mark Golding should lose, there's every chance that every single one of them would also lose. They are risers, and they are the top leadership of the Rise United movement. They were the ones that was in that Rise United strategist group, the WhatsApp group, where they were planning their takeover of the PNP, and they eventually succeed in doing so. So if there is any support for Mark Golding, it's coming from these five that's behind him. Now, I see Lawrence Roy suggesting that Angela Brownberg and Dayton Campbell are likely to sit on the fence, not support Mark Golding's leadership because they may be seeking leadership for themselves. But I disagree with the assertion, and I disagree with it based upon what I read and what I believe this movement would mean for each and every one of them. If they're committed and loyal, and the intention is to keep control of the People's National Party, then certainly that would not work for them. What would work for them, I would expect, is for them to sit down and make a decision about Mark Golding's leadership. I would expect them to decide on whether he should go or he should stay. And if they decide that he should go, they would select from among themselves somebody who should run on their behalf in order to maintain their power and control over the PNP. That is what I would expect. Anything other than that, then what they're doing is dividing themselves and in the process lose power. And I don't see how that spell any sense at all, especially after they work so hard and they have a stronger hold on the party now because of the other cowards that refuse to do anything about them. So no, them breaking ranks with the risers to run on them own would simply divide the movement and cause the whole of them to lose power. And therefore, I don't see how that will make any sense. And therefore, I don't think it will ever happen. 3 out of the 28, I refer to them as Mark Golding's loyalists. And you are to understand that to also mean Peter Bunting's loyalists. Bunting was supposed to have said to somebody, when you see Mark, you see me, and when you see me, you see Mark. I think the riser was a little confused as to who they should be taking them orders from. And that was when Mark became leader of the PNP. So the loyalists now would be Wavell Hines, one of the 4 deputy general secretaries. And then you have Richard Azan, who was a former vice president under them. And then Tony Hilton, if I remember right, he is a legal advisor to the party. And these are votes that Mark Golding can count on. From the get-go, Tony Hilton has been supporting them, if I remember right. And Azan, I do believe he may have supported Peter Phillips, and then he chose to support Mark rather than Lisa. And of course, I do believe that Wavell Hines, whatever he was before, I think him is now a riser. So what we have so far are the 6, including Mark Golding, the core. And then you have the 3, that would make it 9. And now I'm counting another 3, which would make it 12. Now, I call this group Peter Bunting's Rise Crew. The 2 ladies are the candidates for the Hanover seats, East and West. I never expected that they would win, but they did. And for certain, Heather Miller Bennett, she was Mark Golding's strong supporter and admirer. And I have no reason to believe that Perkis is not the same. As to whether they can be properly classified as risers, I can't say that either. But I can reason. If Heather Miller was remotely interested in selecting a candidate that could win elections, when she had a choice between Mark Golding and Lisa Hanna, one would have thought that her obvious choice would have been Lisa Hanna, but it was not. She chose Mark, the man who they said could unite the party, but then never said he could win any elections. So my argument is that winning election is not one of the consideration that a Heather Miller would put on the reason for selecting a candidate. And if that is out of the way, then somebody needs to tell me why it is that she would not choose to select Mark Golding again if there's a contest and instead choose to support Damian Crawford. What would have been her reason for supporting Damian Crawford? I don't see it. And therefore, I believe she's going to go with the choice that she made before. She believed that Mark Golding was the best person to lead the party, and she chose him over Lisa Hanna. And I fully expect if there's a contest in 2027, she will do the same by selecting Mark Golding over Damian Crawford. So this means now that Mark Golding can look forward to the support of 12 persons, including himself. That is my analysis. Now, let us take a look now at the persons who I believe would be most likely to support Damian Crawford. When you look at who it is that may support Damian Crawford, you have to take into consideration one important fact. This would be a challenge to a leader that is sitting that has no intention or does not want to demit office. And so we have to bear that in mind. We must also bear in mind the fact that the PNP has its own cultural behavior and its own cultural beliefs. And one such belief is that once you become a leader, and it does not matter how you become that leader, whether you become a leader by fear or foul means, once them slap you with the title and say you're a president, that's it. And they believe that you must face at least one general election. They also believe that the leader should be the one to determine when he should go. That is their cultural belief. And so in this case, if Mark Golding should choose to remain, Damian Crawford would have been presenting a challenge to persons who may have this old school idea. But that aside, if I'm looking at candidates that are what I would call the surest bet for Damian Crawford, I would say these are the four candidates. I would say Mikhail would be one who would support Damian Crawford irrespective because he had supported Lisa Hanna. He is somebody who is supporting a candidate that can win elections for the PNP. That's the first thing. Second thing is that Mikhail, I'm of the impression that Mikhail is the kind of person that believes that every person has a right to run. Once you're paid up, you have a right to run for any position you want in the party, whenever it is that the party says you can run, and therefore a person who supports that person has every entitlement and right to do so. And he would have been correct. If you have a right to challenge, then the persons who support you have a right to support you. As simple as that. So I expect that that will be Mikhail's thinking. I expect doing Vaz own business, right? And it seems as if, there's a mutual admiration going on between him and Damian, and they are very good friends by all accounts, so he will support his friend. As for Philip Paulwell, I put him in there, but I'm a little iffy about it. If Paulwell is of the opinion that a challenge would divide the party, then he would be, or maybe reluctant to support any candidate. He would be trying to discourage Damian from not running. If Mark Golding decide that, I'm going to leave, maybe Paulwell will be pushing for them not to have a contest, but instead have a selection, just to avoid the elections because of how it tends to divide the PNP. Right? That has been his thing, and that is the reason why there has been no vice president election in the PNP since I think when was it 2020, right? They have been selected, which is against the party's constitution. And so I would say that I'm going to put Paul with there. So Damian can count on these 4 MPs as his surest bet. Now, I call these 3 the Damian's It Depends crew because I think that they may be old fashioned and maybe they may not want to support a candidate against a sitting leader who has not indicated his intention to leave. We're talking about Dennis Gordon, Fitz Jackson, and Rosemary Shaw. I think they call her Yvonne Shaw. So if these 3 were to break, in other words, if they were to make a decision, it is very likely that they would come on the side of Damian Crawford. Rose, Fitz, and Dennis Gordon, these are authentic PNP people, right? And that is the reason why I think they would not support Mark Golding irrespective. Looking at the number of MPs in Damian's corner, we have 5, including himself, plus these 3, that would make it 8. So by my count and my analysis, Mark Golding has 12, including himself, and Damian Crawford has 8, including himself. That's a total of 20 MPs accounted for. We're going to look now for the other 8 and see where we believe they stand. Now we have this group of 7 members of parliament that I call members of parliament on the fence. And there are 2 distinct groups. You have those who don't like the confusion and the mix up, and they're not going to take sides. They will just accept the decision of the delegates and work with whoever it is that is elected. I anticipate that that will be true of, first of all, Cousins, Lothan Cousins. I noticed that them have a mix up as a supporter of Mark Golding. I don't think that will happen, and I'll be very surprised indeed were that to happen. Lothan Cousins is an authentic PNP, and were he to jump off the fence, I fully expect him to vote for Damian Crawford. Then there is Isaac Buchanan. I think Isaac is too bossy if we go take side and a try. No, I think Isaac may sit on the fence. Kenneth Russell, I expect that he will sit on the fence too, as well as Alfred Dawes and Julian Robinson. Although I hear that his auntie, Heather Robinson, may have something to say about that. The second group of persons and MPs that I anticipate will be on the fence would be Natalie Nita Garvey as well as Denise Daly. And I think they may take that decision because remember, they're close friends with Lisa Hanna and they were staunch supporters and they fought really hard for her to win the leadership in 2020. Now, Damian Crawford is not a riser. He is an authentic PNP, no doubt about it. And Lisa Hanna is also an authentic PNP. Had the 2 of them pulled together, then they might have gotten the victory and we might be looking at a very different leader today. But Damian Crawford was selfish. He knew that if Lisa, being at her age, were to get the leadership, it would be some time before he could be looking to be a leader himself. So rather than support somebody who is an authentic PNP like himself, he was willing and prepared to throw his lot in with Mark Golding in exchange for them making him the party president because he didn't have a seat. And then Mark Golding now will be the leader of the opposition. So he was going to swing with the risers rather than support his own. But at the same time, nobody knew what the risers were up to at that point. So we can forgive him. So I would expect that Natalie Nita and Denise Daly will be very, very reluctant to support his candidacy because he did not support them when he had his opportunity to. The final MP that we will be looking at is Miss Zulika Jess, a very strange and unusual young woman, selfish even. And I've given her the title Goes Where the Wind Blows because that's she. I remember during the last election, internal election in 2020, she was being asked by all sorts to come and join them, come and join. Oh, she not ready yet. She not make up her mind yet. You know, when she finally make up her mind, about the week before the election. That is about the time when there was a lot of surge and momentum for the Rise camp. And evidently she saw which way the wind was blowing. And so she came out and made a nice speech on her Facebook page talking about why she thinks Mark Golding is the best person to lead the party and all that kind of thing there. And so she endorsed Mark Golding at the last minute. That last minute endorsement may not have been of much use to them, but I would suspect that they appreciated it. When the election was over, she was rewarded by being given a seat on the disciplinary committee, and she was one of the three risers that was on that committee. And then she was rewarded with the seat in Northeast St. Elizabeth, although I'm sure she will argue that she worked very hard to get that seat. And she walk up and down the place and hold babies and, go to funerals and churches and graduations and all that. So we give her that. I think it's safe to say that for certain, Jess will be given an endorsement if there is a race. But as to who she'll be giving that endorsement to, your guess is as good as mine. Whichever way she sees the wind is blowing, that's who she will give her support to. And that is all that I can say about Zulika Jess. She is one young woman that has no conviction and no commitment to anything. Not at all. Well, folks, let me leave it here for today. Let me thank you all for joining me. Please let me know what you think about the video and the things that I have presented. And I hope everyone remembered to give the video a thumbs up. If you have not yet done so, please subscribe as well and share. Until next time, take very good care of yourselves and walk good.